Hello to the farthest reaches of the internet, welcome to this video. I've been playing video games for as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories as a child involve video games in some capacity, such as playing New Super Mario Bros. Wii on a Christmas morning with my dad, or on a different Christmas morning, getting my own DSi along with my now favorite game, which you're going to find out what that is later in the video. It's been a good gaming-filled 17 years, and I wanted to recap my favorites in that time. Quick warning that there will be spoilers from many of the games on this list, so if you don't want to get spoiled, just go ahead and skip to the next game. So without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite games of all time.
I haven't really ever been into or played many simulation games. I never got into The Sims, didn't play Animal Crossing until New Horizons, and I never tried any Harvest Moon games. But that last bit changed when I tried out Harvest Moon's spiritual successor, Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley was a complete gamble of a purchase on my part, and I hit the freaking jackpot. What started out as a small distraction from life became a full-blown addiction. I played every day for hours at a time for the better part of 4 months.
There was always something to do. Work on the farm, play arcade games in the saloon, explore the caves, and talk to the local townsfolk. And while I'm not typically one to talk to NPCs, I felt compelled to here. Each one has a very unique personality, and not a single character feels half-baked. And because I know Stardew fans will want to know, my favorite is Penny. I've heard that's kind of a basic pick, but I don't care. She is awesome. But of course you don't just talk to people. I already said a ton of other things you can do. And one of those things I mentioned is exploring the caves. When I first bought the game, I didn't even know that there was combat at all. It wasn't until I fished up a Neptune sword that I realized that you could fight things. And the combat, well, it's alright. It's a farming simulator, what do you expect, deep combat? All jokes aside, the combat does its job and it never really feels unfair.
I didn't even touch on a lot of what Stardew Valley has to offer. There's just so much that I could probably go on for hours talking about all the stuff you can do. But I have to cut myself off sometime, so I guess I'll do it here.
Many stories are very clear about what their themes are. They sort of spell it out for the audience, because they want to make sure that you understand what it's trying to say. But naturally, not all stories abide by this way of thinking, which makes the themes all the more impactful. And no game does this better than Final Fantasy IX.
Final Fantasy IX seems at first like it's a happy-go-lucky RPG, with its medieval setting and seemingly simple characters. But what lies beneath this veil of joy is a surprisingly deep and dark tale about tragedy, sacrifice, and even death itself.
The plot admittedly has a slow start and is hard to explain without going into great detail, but I'm going to try to explain what about the plot makes it so good. We all have a certain lifespan, none of us can live forever. No matter what anyone does, we can't extend that time. And Final Fantasy IX shows two very different reactions to this. First is Kuja, the main villain, who upon learning he has a fixed lifespan, enters a deep rage, realizing that, in his mind, life is meaningless. He then tries to destroy the universe as he sees no point in life for anyone as a whole, if we're all going to die someday. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Vivi, a black mage that we meet early in the game. When Vivi learns that he and others of his kind only have about a year to live, he naturally begins to question his existence. He decides to make the most of the time he was given, to enjoy life and to protect it at all costs. It's honestly a really good life lesson, and it's one of the main reasons that the game resonates with me as much as it does.
I never really played very many Metroidvanias growing up. Aside from a Flash game called Robot Wants Fishy, my knowledge of Metroidvanias is limited specifically to Metroid, which was a series I never really planned on playing.
Huh, so that's what it's like to be hated.
But I'm always up to give a new genre a fair shot, and that brings me to my number 8 pick, Hollow Knight.
Released in 2017, Hollow Knight is an indie Metroidvania with a heavy focus on upgrading your movement rather than your combat abilities. With an incredibly deep yet hidden lore and plot, you're instantly thrown into the massive world of Hollow Nest. The options at your disposal are very limited at first, only sporting a simple jump and a nail slash. But of course this is a Metroidvania we're talking about. You get more moves than that. Wall jumps, a dash, double jumps, and more can be obtained by exploring and fighting bosses. And there are a ton of bosses. My personal favorite has got to be the Mantis Lords. I don't know why that fight is so fun, but it is. If I had to say what my favorite part of Hollow Knight is, though, I'd have to say it's that there's always something new to discover, and always something new to find. And the map doesn't ruin this discovery either. It specifically doesn't tell you where some rune transitions are to ensure that discovery is up to you, and that's something I can really appreciate.
Something some of you may know about me is my love of speedrunning. The charity event Games Gone Quick is actually what introduced me to Twitch and streaming in general. And that same event is what introduced me to the next game on this list, The Messenger.
The Messenger is a 2018 Ninja Gaiden-inspired indie game that sports a more humorous tone than its inspiration. Tight controls and a fresh new death system push the Messenger leagues ahead of any competition mechanically. But of course, that's not all it offers. You play as the lone survivor of a village of ninjas that was attacked by demons, tasked with taking a scroll to the top of a tower in the mountains. Once you do this, you are then thrust forward in time, which is represented in-game by a graphics upgrade.
The game actually changes art styles, from 8-bit to 16-bit. Even the music gets an upgrade. Not only that, but soon after, once you realize a time loop has been occurring for the past 10,000 years, the Messenger transforms from a level-based linear progression to a full-on Metroidvania. Like, how do you even pull that off?
Each of the levels you played through previously become part of an interconnected world, and you even travel to new areas as well. Using your new time-traveling abilities, you can now switch back and forth between the future and present, which opens up new passages. It's just such a cool concept, and I have no idea how the devs at Sabotage Studios came up with it. What makes this even more impressive is that this was their first game. Talk about a good first impression. What? Did you really think I wasn't going to include a Galaxy game on this list? Super Mario Galaxy 2 is what comes to my mind when someone mentions the perfect 3D platformer. And it really is. It takes what the first game did and does it even better. I know most of the praises I give to Galaxy 2 originated in Galaxy 1, but if I'm gonna be honest, both games are equally good. I just slightly prefer the sequel. A large portion of why I love this game so much is its music. I love the choice of using an orchestral soundtrack, which gives off a more epic and cinematic feel. The credits theme stands out to me as my favorite, and is one of my favorite pieces of video game music in general. But of course, an excellent soundtrack isn't enough to get a game on this list. It's gotta have good gameplay and levels. And oh boy does it have both. Controls are tight as ever, and it's really fun to control. The galaxies are also some of the best worlds in any 3D platformer. Cloudy Court Galaxy, Chompworks Galaxy, Melty Monster, Puzzle Plank, and all the Bowser and Bowser Jr. levels stand out to me as the best.
Ultimately, I don't think I had too much to say about Galaxy 2, but that's just because anything I can say, I feel like it's already been said. It's just a really good game. Simple as that.
Retro Studios is a game developer that I don't typically play games from. While they're mostly known for Metroid Prime, there is another series that they have developed for, and that is, of course, the modern Donkey Kong Country games.
Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is actually the first game I ever pre-ordered, and it's also one of the only games I bought on both Wii U and Switch. And it is without a doubt one of the best 2D platformers I've ever played.
This game takes level design to a whole new level. See what it did there? Whole new level design. Okay, I'll be quiet. Everything in each level feels like it's part of an actual world. The level backgrounds are straight up gorgeous, and so is quite literally everything else in the game. They somehow even made the auto-scrollers fun. Like, how do you even do that? The Rocket Barrel levels, and especially the minecart levels, are some of the most fun levels in the game. And at no point does it ever feel like it was made in a level editor, unlike some other 2D platformers I know of. Donkey Kong also controls very well, and it makes for some platforming that feels very fair. But just because the game is fair doesn't mean it's not hard, and I love a good challenge. Tropical Freeze offers a great difficulty curve that can produce some very hard levels near the end, especially the special levels that are unlocked by collecting all the Kong letters in each world. They provide a great challenge with sections that feel super satisfying to pull off. And speaking of collectibles, there are a ton. Each level has 4 Kong letters, which will unlock the previously mentioned special levels. There are also puzzle pieces in each level, the amount ranging from 5 to 9 pieces. I really don't know what it is about them, but I always feel disappointed when I miss them, and often replay levels just to get them all. I feel like it would be a crime if I didn't mention the soundtrack, so I'll just briefly say that it is amazing. My favorite is Homecoming Hijinks because I'm a biased trombone player, which is the lead instrument in that song.
Alright, I'm gonna be honest with you. I really don't know what game to put for my number 4 spot. I'm at a bit of a loss. So instead of picking just one game, it's gonna be a tie. For 2 reasons. First is, well, I love both games equally. And secondly, there's not much to say about them, so combining them kind of makes sense. So the games that are going to take my number 4 spot are Minecraft and Clone Hero.
I'll start with Minecraft. Minecraft is one of those timeless games that I can just sit down with and relax. I've been playing it for as long as I can remember the game existing, and while Minecraft had a bit of a falling out with, well, the entire internet, it still crept its way back into everyone's heart. I really don't think I will ever get tired of it. There's a certain magic to it that no other game has really been able to capture as well as Minecraft has. It will always have a place among the greats. And now for the game it tied with, Clone Hero. Clone Hero, if you haven't guessed already, is a fan-made PC Guitar Hero game. It allows for an unlimited amount of custom songs, or charts as they're called, for you to play. And holy crap has the Clone Hero community created a lot of charts. I've even created a few charts of my own. I don't even know if I want to know how many hours I put into Clone Hero. It's probably up to 1,000 in just over a year of playing. Another aspect that makes Clone Hero so great is the online community. People put in hundreds of hours grinding full combos on impossibly difficult songs. It's just so fun to watch, and the hype behind it is like no other.
Overall, Minecraft and Clone Hero are equally good games. I just really couldn't justify putting one over the other. Now we've hit the top 3. I don't see any of these games changing anytime soon. They just mean too much to me. So let's get talking about them, shall we?
At number 3, we have Celeste. Celeste is a 2018 indie platformer that has a large focus on the story, which is something you don't see too often in platformers. And that story is one of the best stories any game has ever told. You follow Madeline, a young woman who wants to climb a mountain. As the player, you aren't really sure about why she wants to at first, but partway through Chapter 2, we meet what seems to be a dark clone of Madeline, who tries to convince her to go home. And through Madeline's interactions with this part of her, and others that she meets along the way, such as Theo, a fellow mountain climber, Mr. Oshiro, the ghost of the owner of a hotel on the mountain, and an old lady who lives at the base of the mountain, it becomes apparent that Madeline struggles with mental illness, namely depression and anxiety, and that she is climbing this mountain to try to get away from her struggles. The player realizes that Madeline is not only climbing a literal mountain, but a figurative one too. After many fights with this part of her, which we as the player have come to realize represents her mental illness, Madeline learns to not be ashamed of it, rather than trying to run away from it like she's been doing. I don't care who you are, experiencing this story for the first time hits you in the feels hard. Really hard. And not only is the story freaking phenomenal, so is the gameplay. I don't think I've ever felt tighter and more precise controls. It's a complete blast to play. And it's hard too. But this doesn't come at the expense of fairness. There's checkpoints at the beginning of every single room, so even when you die, you never lose progress. The game even tells you to be proud of your death count, as each death means you learn a little bit more. But again, it's still very hard. The free DLC chapter, called Farewell, is probably the hardest level in any game I've ever played. And would you look at that death count? Yeah. If there's one complaint I could make, it's that I wish there were more dialogue option sections. Like, we only get to do it one time at the beginning of Chapter 6. It's really just a missed opportunity, and I would have loved to do it more.
It's hard to believe that there could be anything better. But of course, this is only number 3. We still got 2 more games left. Morality isn't something that's talked about too much in video games. It's been brought up countless times in film, music, and literature, but I can only think of a couple of times where it plays a large role in gaming. And the main game that comes to mind is, of course, Undertale.
At its core, Undertale is a game about acceptance, love, and most of all, determination. It takes a simple concept, a human getting stuck in a world full of monsters, and completely flips it on its head. The monsters you fight aren't just mindless enemies, they all have personalities, and they only attack you because they're scared. And it's up to you to decide whether to kill them or spare them. Not only does this call into question the morality of killing enemies, it's just a really cool game mechanic, turning every battle into a mini puzzle. And the way Toby combined turn-based combat with bullet hells is really cool as well. But the combat isn't by any means the most memorable part of this game. That goes to the characters and story. Undertale has some of the most memorable and believable characters in any RPG I've ever played. They all feel so real, and because they feel so real, the emotions they convey are also very real. I'm hit with a wave of bittersweet sadness every time I leave Toriel behind in the ruins. Sans and Papyrus always bring a smile to my face. I can feel Undyne's pride for the whole of the underground. When Alphys feels trapped in her mistakes, I want to be there for her. I understand the internal struggle of Asgore, who does what he needs to do for his nation, even if he doesn't want to. And I don't think anyone can truly put into words the emotions that you feel at the end of True Pacifist when talking to Asriel. That moment is the closest I've ever been to crying at a game, which is impressive because I am not a crier. And this moment is made even more emotional by the music. And the music in Undertale is some of the best music in all of gaming. The way Toby Fox was able to weave such catchy melodies through such complex chord progressions is amazing to me. And his frequent use of Liet motifs also fascinates me. Some of my personal favorites include Asgore, Hopes and Dreams, Fallen Down Reprise, his theme, and the self-titled track, Undertale.
Undertale is truly something special, and is honestly more than a game to me. It's an experience that I will never forget for the rest of my life, and it will always live on as one of the greatest games ever created. Before we go on to talk about the number one game, I wanted to briefly talk about some honorable mentions. These are games that didn't quite make the list for one reason or another.
Firstly is Super Mario Maker 2. While I love this game a lot, there isn't really much I can say about it. And most of the reason I love it is because of the community. Another is Katana Zero. I didn't want to have two ninja games on this list at the same time, and so I decided to put The Messenger on it instead. And while this is still a ninja game, Katana Zero is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, being a gritty, gory, and brutally difficult experience that is extremely fun and satisfying to slash your way through. And last but not least is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This was on my original top 10 list that I made a few years ago, but I decided to take it off here. The main reason for this is simply it's lost its magic. That first playthrough is one of the most fun gaming experiences I've ever had, but I just can't go back and play it again. I still think it's one of the greatest games ever created, but the magic is just kinda gone for me.
Here we are at number one. It's time for the big reveal. My favorite game of all time is Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. And that probably isn't that much of a surprise.
I love everything about this game. I love the story, I love the combat, the music, the characters, the minigames, everything. So I'm just gonna go start talking about it. Let's start with the story. For those who don't know, the game starts out with some sort of disease spreading in toads called the blorbs, which causes toads to get really fat. And after crashing a meeting on the blorbs, Bowser gets cast out to Dimblewood Forest, where he and Kamek meet a mysterious figure. After giving Bowser a mushroom that causes him to inhale everything, and a little bit of foreshadowing, the figure reveals himself to be none other than Lord Fawful. Bowser then returns to Peach's castle and inhales everyone, including Mario, Luigi, and Peach. While this was the first game in the series that I played, it is super cool to see Fawful return as a main villain, this time with his own sidekick, Midbus. It's also nice to have a companion character that actually feels like a character, and not a robot. I'm talking, of course, about Starlo, a star sprite that came over to the Mushroom Kingdom to help solve the Blorb crisis. And unlike Stuffwell from Partners in Time, Starlo actually has a personality. I wonder what happened to Stuffwell. I imagine after Starlo arrived, they just kind of threw it out.
Oh, a floaty star thingy. Oh well, guess I don't need this anymore. Yeah.
Bowser's Inside Story follows in the same footsteps as his predecessors as far as combat goes, but it feels much less loose and much more satisfying than it did before. The timing windows for both Bowser and the Bros feel just right, and his special attacks actually feel useful during regular battles, which is something that the other games don't do as well. The boss fights are really fun too. Each one is based around its own mechanic, from having to inhale the boss as Bowser, to having a weak point that only a specific Bro can damage. There's also the giant fights. I've heard a lot of people complain about these, but I've honestly always really liked them. Each one brings something new to the table. The first time is pretty standard, but after that you have the tower where you have to knock it into the lake, the train battle where you... and the epic battle against Peach's fossilized castle. Another point of criticism I see sometimes is about the minigames, but once again, I disagree with that criticism. I love the minigames. They are always a really nice change of pace, and they're never too close together. I especially love the strength minigame once it becomes a rhythm game. And on the topic of rhythm, the music is phenomenal. 100% Yoko Shimomura's finest work. The grand finale still remains my favorite piece of video game music ever, with Traveling About on a Journey of Memories being a close second.
And because I've rambled on for so long, I'll try to keep this last bit brief. Bowser's Inside Story will always be my favorite game. It means so much to me on an emotional level, and it is something I will always hold near and dear to my heart. And on that note, I thank you all for watching, and I bid you all a good night.